These 8 character tricks are weird, some of them feel like cheating, and some of them sound like terrible advice. But if you watch this whole video and start using all 8 of these for your character, I guarantee you that your novel will improve. Hi, I'm John Matthew Fox of BookFox, and I help authors write better books through courses and coaching. So let's get started with the very first weird piece of advice for your characters. Create power imbalances. So what sort of power imbalances exist between your characters? Is one smart and the other one dumb? Is one rich and the other one poor? Is one beautiful and the other one ugly? If you don't have any power imbalances, or maybe they're just kind of small, then you want to create them and then work also on enlarging them. Now, remember that you don't just want power imbalances between your protagonist and your antagonist. You want them all across the board. Like, you want them between the 2 best friends, you want them between the antagonist and his minions. And it's also a really clever idea if at some point in the book you try to reverse the power imbalance. Like in Rain Man, at first we think the Hoffman character is kind of dumb, but then the Tom Cruise character realizes, oh, he's a genius. Another good strategy for your book is to use complex power imbalances between your characters, like in The Last of Us. Joel is the fighter, he's the survivor, and he's the one that sort of can navigate all of this violence. But Ellie, on the other hand, she can't do any of that, but what she does have is she has the power in her blood to maybe reverse this whole pandemic. The second weird character trick you definitely should be using in your book is have them criticize others. I feel like 99% of the time, authors concentrate on what their character likes, right? Like, oh, they like these 5 things, and that defines who they are as a person. But what I'm saying is that more often than not, you need to define what your character dislikes, who they're criticizing, and why. Because a character who's criticizing other people's grammar is so very different than a character who is criticizing other people's courage or lack of courage. For an example of this, let's look at Normal People by Sally Rooney. Marianne's constantly critiquing her classmates at Trinity and sort of writing them off as being really shallow people. But what she's doing is she feels hurt by these people, and so she's like criticizing them in order to protect herself. Or look at The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Holden's Caulfield relentless critique of phonies ends up telling you a lot more about him, about his youth, and as about his idealism than it does about the people he's critiquing. Or look at A Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. Ignatius's grand proclamations like denouncing all of modern society just reveals him to be a complete fool. It doesn't actually convince you that, he's actually right. Now, this technique works whether or not your readers actually agree with the criticism. If they agree, like some readers of Normal People might, that they end up bonding with the character. And if they disagree, like in Confederacy of Dunces, they're still getting a great idea of who this character is. And if you want to go on a much deeper level, sometimes what characters dislike in others is what they dislike most about themselves. For example, Colonel Fitz in American Beauty is a closeted gay man who is homophobic. Hey, you only have 2 weeks left before the next cohort of BookFox Lab starts up, so if you are committed to writing a fantastic novel and sharing it with the world, come join us. We would love to help you through one-on-one mentor meetings, through weekly feedback on your work, and I promise you that you are going to come out with a book that you are really proud of. The link's in the description. You can click on that because you don't have to live the writing life alone. Come join us in the lab. This next point is the most helpful one in this entire video. It is number 3, unravel your character. You want to plant at least one thing, or sometimes 2 things or 3 things in your novel that unravels your character, just causes them to completely fall apart. Now, these are different things for different characters, right? Someone losing their job might completely unravel one character, while another character just like shrugs it off like, oh, no big deal. And hey, if you have a good idea of what is going to unravel your character, please mention it in the comments. I would love to see the ideas that you guys are coming up with. Now, the mistake that most writers make is they concentrate nearly entirely upon the incident that causes the unraveling. But often that's not the most exciting part. The most exciting part is seeing how your character reacts to that event. So let's look at My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. Now, the incident that causes her to unravel is the death of both of her parents. I mean, this is a very familiar trope. I feel like we've seen it a trillion times. So that's not that interesting. But how she unravels is really interesting. She takes enormous amounts of pharmaceutical drugs and sort of hibernates for a year, sometimes sleeping for days at a time. Another option you have in your book is to create a whole series of events that slowly build build up to your character unraveling in a very public and visible way. And for this example, we're going to look at Carrie by Stephen King. Here we see bullying from her classmates about her weight. We see the humiliation of the whole period in the shower scene. And we also see her mother getting a little wacky and locking her in a closet. Only after all of those series of events do we finally get the climactic event, which is the dumping pig's blood on her at prom. That's what makes her snap. And that unraveling leads to her using the telekinesis and, mayhem ensuing. This next point is a really important one that you should not miss for your book. It is number 4. Employ the law of character conservation. The law of character conservation just says the fewer characters that you have in your novel, the higher the likelihood that each one of those characters is very important. So let's say you have very few characters in your novel. What that allows you to do is take a really deep dive into every single one of them. So if you think about Misery with Stephen King, it's basically just Paul and Annie for the entire book. Or think about The Old Man and the Sea with Hemingway. It's just Santiago and a fish. But I will give 2 very good reasons of why you would need a large cast of characters. One would be if you're writing some sort of mystery, then you need a large cast of named characters because you need a lot of potential suspects, so it's not so easy for the reader to guess who the murderer is. That's why any Agatha Christie mystery like Murder on the Orient Express has this huge cast of characters. The second reason why you'd want to expand your cast of characters is it gives more of a real to life feeling. I mean, just think about all the people you know and interact with on a monthly basis. So in 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, he's painting this huge canvas of multi-generations of all these relatives and all these named characters, and it does give you a sense of their whole family and that whole region. But when you expand your cast, the danger is readers get confused. But I don't think the problem is with the number of people that you have, but it's really about making sure you're differentiating between each of the characters. Charles Dickens is sort of legendary for overpopulating his novels, but in David Copperfield, you don't mix up the scheming Uriah Heep with the optimistic Micawber because they're such different people. It's very easy for the reader to keep those two separate. But if you do have a large cast of characters, I would recommend making a dividing list and separate them into 2 categories. One would be scene driving characters. These are the ones who can really change what happens. And then 2 would be atmosphere characters. These are the ones lingering on the fringes of your story, not that crucial to the actual mechanism of the plot. It's fine to have a large amount of atmosphere characters. The ones you really need to pay attention to are the scene driving characters, because those are the ones you really have to do the characterization work for to make sure readers can differentiate them. I really love this next point. It is probably my favorite one in the whole video. It is number 5. Make your character drop their guard. So every person has a face they present to the world and then more of a secret private self that they don't show anyone. Your goal when writing a character is to come up with an event that will tear that public persona mask off of your character and reveal that true inner self. So first I'm going to give you a very highbrow novelistic example, and then I'm going to give you a lowbrow movie example. So first, look at The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Gatsby and Daisy are driving a car and they hit Myrtle Wilson and they kill her. So because of that guilt, and because he can't sleep and it's the middle of the night and he's tired, Gatsby finally opens up to Nick Carraway about his past, about the first time he meets Daisy, about how he changed himself from being James Gatz into, Gatsby. So if there wasn't the trauma of hitting Myrtle and killing her, then Gatsby might have never opened up in that way to Nick Carraway. Okay, now for the really stupid movie example, because I just can't help myself. Let's look at Austin Powers. So Austin Powers projects this public face of being like this really randy, sex-obsessed maniac. But when the Elizabeth Hurley character gets drunk and tries to kiss him, he refuses her advances. He says, "Oh no, baby, you're drunk. We can't do anything." So really his true self is revealed to be more of a gentleman than we initially thought from what he was projecting. So ask yourself right now, what is one moment in your novel when your character's pretenses are stripped away and they admit something really true and vulnerable about themselves? And hey, a lot of the time this only happens maybe once or twice in a novel, so choose it really carefully. Also, if you're enjoying the video, please smash that subscribe button faster than you say when you're writing, "Oh, I'll just fix that in revision." And if this video helped you with your book, please hit the like button, because that tells me, oh, I should make more of these type of videos. Let's move on to the next weird character trick, which is number 6. Use setting to manipulate your characters. How are you using your setting to manipulate your characters? I mean, are you using your setting to manipulate your characters? I hope you are. I mean, the most common mistake authors make is they think of their setting as a backdrop. It's just, sort of present in the book. While the way you should think about your setting is as a pressure device. It should be exerting pressure on your characters. Now, horror is the genre where I think this advice is probably most obvious. I mean, you have a spooky house or this cabin in the woods or a dark forest, like, oh, of course that's going to affect the characters. But even if you're writing your novel in kind of a plain Jane setting, like, I don't know, suburbia, yeah, but that sameness and sort of monotonous and suffocating environment, that still does end up affecting your characters. Think of Revolutionary Road by Richard Yates or The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides. Now, when you're using your setting to manipulate characters, make sure you do not commit the pathetic fallacy, because it's, pathetic. The pathetic fallacy says that every single time that your character is sad, it's going to be raining outside. And when they're happy, it's going to be sunny outside. I think it's a really shallow relationship of character to setting, and it's showing how the character mood is impacting the setting rather than what I'm saying in this point, which is to have the setting impact the character. And the last example I'll give of this is Seven Eves by Neil Stephenson. So the moon shatters into a million pieces. All those pieces fall to Earth as comets, essentially making life on Earth impossible. So the remnants of humanity escape up into basically a space station around Earth where they're trying to survive. And obviously the setting affects them because, one, they have very little space, so there's nowhere to hide from other people, which creates all sort of like very complex social dynamics. And then two, what happens is a lot of factions are created. People splinter off and form their own political groups, and all of these groups are kind of at war with one another. You absolutely need the setting of this space station, which has all these different little parts that are cobbled together in order to have that effect upon the characters. You're gonna like this next point. It is number 7. Give your character an identity question. You've probably heard 1,000 times like, oh, give your characters goals, give your characters desires. Those aren't bad pieces of advice, but I think it's really useful to make sure you ask yourself, what is my character's identity question? And identity questions are big things like, who am I? And am I a hero or a coward? What an identity question does is it makes your book about more than just plot outcomes. It also makes your book about the resolution of your character's very selfhood. So look at a book like Factotum by Charles Bukowski. This is a book where the main character has like 70 different jobs. He keeps on getting fired from every single one. And he comes to a point where he's like, what kind of man am I? Because he realizes, oh, I'm an alcoholic, I am a womanizer, and I can't hold a job for more than a week. And he starts questioning like, what sort of a person am I? But make sure if you do this, don't have the identity question be the same exact question as your plot question. Like if your plot is about like whether or not the character gets the promotion, and the identity question is like, am I good enough to deserve a promotion? That's too much overlap. The identity question should be something different, like, am I still the person my parents raised me to be? I really like the identity question in The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Evelyn's identity question is, can I be loved for who I am, or only for who I pretend to be? Ooh, that is a savage question. And that's really what the end of the book ends up talking about. All right, now it's time for the very last, but perhaps best point. Number 8, give your character a wound. The main mistake authors make when they give their character a wound is they treat that wound as an all-encompassing explanation of who this character is. So I'd recommend you run through this little test I created to see whether you might be doing that with your character. Is your character, 1, determined by their trauma, or 2, shaped by their trauma? So if your character is determined by their trauma, that means their trauma is explaining every single part of who this character is. While if they are shaped by their trauma, that means, oh, the trauma is one aspect of who they are as a person, but it's not everything. For a good example of a character who's shaped by her trauma but not determined by it, let's look at Gillian Flynn's book, Sharp Objects. So the main character's wound to this novel is the death of her sister, and so she reacts to that by cutting and drinking. But it's really only one aspect of what shaped her. Her abusive mother also shaped her. Growing up in this small town certainly shaped her. And also her journalistic background and her job shapes her. But let me just add a caveat, like not every single character needs some sort of traumatic backstory wound. They can be driven instead by ambition or curiosity or ideology. But one thing you should definitely avoid is giving every single character in your novel one wound in their backstory, which defines them as a person. Because what it does is it just makes all of your characters feel way too similar. Hey, If your goal is to write a fantastic novel, come join us in Bookfox Lab. Click the link below, reach out to me, and I'd love to help you with your novel. And hey, I hope this video really helped you think through your characters, start to develop them more, deepen them, and I'm so happy for you to put that on the page and for your characters to come alive.